Okay, welcome everybody. I'm glad you could join us today for our session on the Creative Cloud Packager. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I'd like to welcome you and introduce Jim Babbage and Ryan Dietz. They are from our Education Solutions Consulting team. And as you'll see from the screen, they're going to talk about the how to use the Creative Cloud Packager to deploy your Creative Cloud applications. So I'm going to let Jim and Ryan take it away.
Okay, thanks very much, Matt. And yes, thanks everyone for making the time today to join the presentation. Um, just to give you a sort of a sense of where we're going with this before we get started, I know from my talking with several faculty, some people actually are in charge of their own labs in terms of deployment. Some aren't. So this overview will give you a sense of either what you might be going to be going through if you're deploying content or software, or it'll give you a picture or a window into what your IT department actually does when they're putting together a package that's going to be deployed out to your labs. So we're going to get started here, and we're going to start with this. This should not be a painful process, and all too often it does feel that way. Um, Now, we're going to hopefully outline some of the ways to sort of simplify that process or make it a little easier, more understandable. But keep in mind that from a standpoint of an enterprise customer or a paying customer, you have access to help. So before you start getting that face or pulling on that hair, reach out to us, and we will do our best to help you out. So this is kind of the 10,000-foot overview. I'm just going to put this whole build together first, and we'll look at the different steps here. This is basically the entire process. So we start off with a packaging tool. That's the Creative Cloud Packager. You'll download that from what we call our Adobe licensing website, or from the Adobe Enterprise dashboard if you've been entitled for that. If you're going to be doing serialized deployment, which basically is also often referred to as anonymous deployment, you'll get that serial number also from the licensing website. So you'll download the Adobe installers, that's the Creative Cloud Packager, and once you go through the process of setting that up, it's a really easy process. You'll actually start downloading the installers or the applications themselves to be installed out to your systems. Once those packages are downloaded, the packager actually builds a package for you, and then essentially the next step in this really high level overview is you deploy the package, any exceptions that might be there. And we'll talk about those as we go through. So the Creative Cloud Packager does a few different things. And depending on what you are working with, some of these things may stand out. But the Packager will package up Creative Cloud for Teams, probably not something many of you are working with. A Creative Cloud for Enterprise, which is likely more the case. But also it'll package up Captivate, Presenter, FrameMaker, Technical Communication Suite, as well as Photoshop and Premiere Elements. And what this basically does, what the packager does, is it converts Adobe's own proprietary installers into industry standard installers. So that would be an MSI for Windows or a PKG file for Mac. So let's sort of go into the process here of building out that package. So starting off, if you are going to be using the Adobe licensing website to get a hold of the Creative Cloud Packager, you'll log in, okay, to the Creative Cloud Packager website, and you'll get your CCE serial number. Now this is you'll need this if you're not doing name deployment. Okay, name deployment is a different animal where users are basically entitled to the software and basically administrate their own machines. You'll also be able to download the Creative Cloud Packager from here as well. Now, let's see, go through here a bit more. Once you're logged into the licensing website, and this is again something you may not be doing, but your IT department may be doing for you, you'll end up going to the licensing or licenses section of the website. And from there, once you've logged in, gone to the licensing the serializer, the licenses section, you're going to be with this dashboard. And essentially, you may see two different serial numbers here. Now, the main difference is one of them is a Creative Cloud version that doesn't include the video tools because they have different things for codecs and things, permissions, and so on. So some schools don't utilize those. So we have a video and a non-video license there. So typically, if you're going to be deploying the entire suite of tools, you're going to be working with the video-based serial. And you can see here as well, we've got the Premiere Pro, After Effects, Audition, SpeedGrade, and Prelude are the tools that require that video serial number. Next step is to install the Creative Cloud Packager. So a couple things to note here. If you're deploying it both to Mac and to Windows, you'll need the Macintosh version of the Packager on a Mac machine and the Windows version of a Packager on a Windows machine. Ideally, working with the 64-bit is the best choice there. Once the Packager has been downloaded and you've installed it, one of the first things you're going to have to do is accept the license agreement, or you don't get much further. So we'll just tap on accept, and you're brought to this window here. So you see three options: create package, edit package, and create a license file. We're going to get started right from the beginning by creating a package. So just tap on that selection, and then you'll sign in. Now, you can sign in with essentially any Adobe ID, but we really recommend, especially if you're planning on utilizing the dashboard, that the same ID is used when you're creating your package as you would be if you're signing into the enterprise dashboard. And Ryan will talk a bit more about that a little bit later. But the idea behind that is it basically syncs up that package with the dashboard, so you'll be notified if there are any updates available for the package you've created. And here we go, a little bit of a note on it. We'll have some information for you we can share as well that goes into more detail about working with the enterprise dashboard, as well as Ryan's presentation. So basically, the enterprise dashboard is a way to administer users and create entitlements in that sense, so you can give them access in a different manner than creating a serialized or anonymous deployment. So once you've chosen, in our case, we're going to go with a serialized package here. One of the first things you'll want to do is put in a name. You want to give the package a name, something that's relevant, that makes sense to what it is you're doing. If you are creating different types of packages, and you do have the ability here to create more than just one big package of software, you might want to name it accordingly. Maybe you're doing just a video package. Maybe you're doing just a web design package. So you want to name them accordingly. You'll pick a spot where you're going to save that package to, and you'll also choose the actual license type. So we've got two types to pick from. Sort of touched on these a little bit already. Serial number license package, which is kind of the traditional or the way it's always been done for deployment. So no login is going to be required by end users. In fact, they don't even really need internet connection to work with this version. But they're also not going to have any access to cloud services or storage. And one other thing to note here too is choosing that serial number license automatically disables what we call the Creative Cloud desktop app, which if you've got a personal subscription, you probably have used quite a bit for updating your own software or keeping in touch with your own storage or other services that are part of the entire Creative Cloud. Now, if you're choosing to go with named users, that's the option to choose here, named license, if you're going to be working with the enterprise dashboard and entitling individuals. So once you've selected your choice, again, we've got named license here selected just so we see some other options. Oops, go back one step there. Once you've selected your choice, you either can disable the Creative Cloud desktop app for admin and essentially make it available only for admin users. So essentially, this is the serialized version for licensing. If you're going to go with the named user versions as well, if you enable this option, the admin users have the ability to update applications using the Creative Cloud desktop application. So it's really up to you which way you want to go with this. If you want to keep the control just within the IT department or whoever's handling the deployments, then you can disable these options. And then end users won't be able to do any updates on their own. And if you're going to Windows, you'll have an option for a 32-bit package or a 64-bit package. You want to keep in mind that many of our video products like Premiere Pro and After Effects are 64-bit only. But if you are going to need to create both of these different types of packages, you will have to create separate packages for each one. So there need to be a 32-bit package and a 64-bit package. Now there's also some other configuration options that you can adjust. Take a look at those. By and large, in general, you're not going to need to make any changes from the default settings here, but here are the choices. So we'll just walk through some of these. When you're dealing with the Adobe Update Manager behavior, this option is typically disabled. Okay, so only IT will manage the package. Okay, you can change that if you like, but this sort of keeps that control of updating and managing the packages and the software itself within the IT department for them to push out when they see fit. If you enable the other option here with admin users updating by the Adobe Update Manager, you can choose this if you want users who've got their own admin privileges on their machines to do the work themselves. That's up to you. And then down below here, Remote Update Manager. This basically gives you the ability to redirect your updates to an internal Adobe Update server. And this one there. And nope, that was the last one. Okay. And okay. So we've maybe changed the configuration options. We might not have, but basically we're back to this screen here. And what we're going to be doing at this point is, oh, actually, we're taking a little jump over to VIP. I got ahead of myself. So Ryan, do you want to talk a bit on this?
Yep. Yeah. Thanks, Jim. Yeah. So we'll talk a little bit about VIP. What we had before in there was pretty general, but there were a few things that were specific to enterprise term license agreements. So this is VIP, also known as Creative Cloud for Education. So this is something that you would buy through a reseller. And the difference here is when you log in and then you choose Creative Cloud for Education, you'll actually see the ability to create an organization or select an organization. And that is basically which VIP pools you're assigned to. So deployment pools actually look a little bit, when you choose select deployment pool, this is what you'll see. You'll see if you bought different types of configuration packages. Now, in education, most people simply just buy Creative Cloud. So you'll see Creative Cloud Complete, and then it will tell you how many it's been deployed to already. So you might buy 10 licenses or 20 licenses of Creative Cloud, and then you'll be able to see how many of those it's already been deployed to as far as a device package or a device license. Now we'll jump back to Jim, and he's going to show how to enter the volume serial number in, and this is more on the enterprise side, obviously, because there's a serial number for enterprise term license agreements.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. All right, so sort of jumping back to where we were before, you've set your configuration, you've named your package. The next step is basically to validate the software. And this is basically a very important step for serialized deployment, because this is what essentially validates or authorizes the software for use on those machines that you're going to be deploying to, say for a lab, for example, so that you don't force any individuals in a lab to try and have to log in with their own user ID. Basically, they're already authenticated because of the serial number. So you'll type in the serial number. And basically hit the next button, and you're automatically brought to the screen that allows you to select the applications that you want to use or to create your package with. Now you can choose as many or as few as you want. As I mentioned earlier, you can create a customized package of specific sets of software if you want to. So you will basically, some of the views in here we'll take a look at. One of the first things you want to do is select your package language. Typically, your enterprise license agreement specifies what languages you have access to, but we have 27 different languages there for those of you who are interested in that in terms of it being naturalized to different languages. Now, if we take a look here, a couple different packages have been selected, and you'll notice over on the right-hand side some different arrows. And basically, the gray arrows essentially mean that the software is in the process or requires downloading, When if you see an arrow with a checkbox, it means that the application has already been downloaded and cached. Now, another option you've got as well is access to archived versions. So if you, for whatever reason, need an earlier version of the Creative Cloud tools, or even for that matter, CS6, if you check mark or enable the checkbox where it says show archived versions, you'll actually see those older versions or make them available for download and packaging as well. I got ahead of myself with the arrows. I do that all the time. But essentially, as I mentioned, the arrow with the check mark means that the software's been downloaded and is ready to package. And a gray arrow with no green check mark means that either it's been partially downloaded and or updates may need to be downloaded as well. Now, as well as the main package itself, we've got the option here to create what we call update packages. So rather than deploying out the entire package again when there are updates available, meaning that a brand new image of it, you can actually build out an update package which just incorporates whatever changes have been applied to the software. So if you want to see what updates are available, just click on the little expansion arrow beside the application. In this case, it's Photoshop. And you'll get a list here of whatever updates are available. If you want to create an update-only package, you want to make sure you deselect the main application, in this case, again, Photoshop, and just make sure that the update itself is what's selected. So once you've made your choices on the tools you're going to put together in that package, basically just click the Build button. You'll get a little progress bar as it builds out the package. And when it's all done, you'll get a summary. Okay, so you'll see a listing basically in terms of icons, what softwares have been put into that package. There's also a log file if you need it to review. But one thing I do want to point out here is that the entire set of Creative Cloud tools is a really large package. It's at least 12 gigabytes in size. So if you're doing this for the first time, we really recommend that you start the download before you leave for the day, and it'll download in the background. So when you come in the next day, all the applications will be cached for you, rather than sitting there and waiting, because it could be a bit of a wait depending on your internet connection. Now, let's take a look at what happens or what's happened now that we've created this package. So what we've got is essentially a couple different folders. We have a build folder you see here, and we may have something called an exceptions folder. We'll talk about both of those. So the build folder is where you'll find all the installers. The exceptions folder is where you may find applications that require a couple extra steps to actually design or to deploy. Open up that build folder. In this case, we're looking at a Windows example here. You're going to see the actual MSI file, okay, or a PKG file if we were on the Mac. And if you open up the exceptions folder, you'll see applications that may require those extra steps. Now, in the shot, it's showing Muse. That's the case. In fact, the only application left that ends up in the exceptions folder at this time is Acrobat on Windows. So all the other tools will deploy without being popped into the exceptions folder. Now we have a couple other preferences inside the packager that you can set or change. We'll take a quick look at these. Basically, you've got the ability to set the cache location for the application downloads, and you've also got the option to purge that cache if you want to. We were talking a bit about exceptions earlier. As I mentioned, right now, at this time, Acrobat 11, Acrobat Pro DC are the only tools that end up being put in that exceptions folder, and we're actually working on making that change with the Acrobat team for Acrobat Pro DC to get that out of the exceptions folder. But that won't be happening till possibly sometime later in 2016. Don't have an exact roadmap on that at the moment. But the process for exceptions is that they have to be deployed separately, and this is really important, before the rest of the CC apps. Okay, and then afterwards you'll deploy out the rest of the the rest of the apps themselves. And the Creative Cloud Packager with all the other tools will license or serialize Acrobat during that process. You can also do some advanced tuning of Acrobat with the Acrobat customization wizard, and we typically recommend this step because there are sometimes, especially with Acrobat, you see a couple personalized free services that really require a user to log in that you probably want to sort of disable before you push it out to the general population. Creating a license file. This is something that happens every once in a while. Hey, it's software. Sometimes things go wrong and a license or serial license breaks. It stops working for some reason, and a user is prompted to start logging in when they boot up their lab machine. So we've got an option with inside the Creative Cloud Packager to create a license file, and it can be utilized for different reasons. It can be to reserialize a serial number that was basically disconnected or broken from a specific desktop, but it can also be used to create a trial license. You need to, if you're planning to sort of work with a chargeback model, you may want to deploy out trials first, and then as you as the school gets the partners to pay out for the software, you can enable that with a serial license file so they can start using the tools beyond 30 days. You can also convert a serialized license to a named user license in this manner. And if you're working with Creative Cloud for Teams, you can migrate from Teams to enterprise versions of the software in the same way. So the process for this is really straightforward. We're back at the beginning of the Creative Cloud Packager screens here, and you'll see an option that says Create License File. Basically, tap that option, give the package a name, choose where you're going to save it to, enter the serial number, and then you get a summary. This happens really quick. It's just a text file. It's very small, so you won't be waiting very long for this to actually be created. Now, inside that folder that was created in that licensing process, with D inside of there, you'll see there's an Adobe serialization exe file and a remove volume serial number exe file. So you can use it to either reserialize or deserialize. Now, one of the things that you've probably noticed is that we're not stuck on that 18 or 24-month cycle for updates anymore. In fact, we're innovating continuously now. And I'd say on average, we're seeing feature-bearing updates usually every quarter. Photoshop, for example, had updates, significantly feature-bearing updates 4 times in one calendar year. So new features, new settings, and things like that are being made available as they are ready. Now, depending on the way you are planning to update or the way your IT department plans to update, you have control over whether you push those updates out or not. It's entirely up to you. But if you want to sort of keep track of what's happening with the updates, what's new, this blog right here, blogs.adobe.com/creative cloud enterprise updates, is the place to go. It will give you access to information on what's currently out and what's out in the new release. So it's a good URL to sort of bookmark if you want to sort of keep track of what's happening. Now, as well as the main tools, Photoshop, Dreamweaver, and so on, we've also got a series of command line tools that we basically are created at the same time that the packager puts together your main creative tool set. Now we've got our exceptions deployer application that actually gets put into the exceptions folder if there are any applications that require being made an exception, which as I mentioned earlier, really is only Acrobat on the Windows side of things. That utility gets put into the exceptions folder. We've got 3 other ones here that are available as well, and they're found in the main Creative Cloud Packager folder. We've got our Remote Update Manager for basically remotely updating end user installations. Our Adobe Update Server Setup tool, which sort of ties in with Update Manager as well if you want to configure an in update server. And then the command line version of our serialization tool called apt, the Adobe Provisioning Toolkit Enterprise Edition. So you can either reserialize after the fact or post-serialize if you want to send out trials first and then enable access once a department has, perhaps paid for their access to the tools. So those are all available to you. They've always been around, but you used to have to go and download them. Now they're just part of what you get when you download the packager and create a package. So I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to talk to you more about deployment details using the enterprise dashboard, which is a really interesting way to get things going from a named user perspective. Ryan?
All right, thanks, Jim. Yeah, we're going to kind of just go through this panel by panel in the enterprise dashboard. Now, the enterprise dashboard is only available to ETLA customers. So right now, this is a perk, an added benefit for those that are utilizing or have enterprise term license agreements with Adobe. And we are going to continue to build this out and add more and more features to make it easier for people to deploy. Now, obviously, everybody knows that single sign-on has become kind of a must in education, and self-service has also become a must for enterprises. So we're trying to figure out solutions for both of those models that I'll explain here in a little bit. So this is the overview tab. When you first open up the enterprise dashboard, this is what you're going to see. We call these cards. So there's a card for each application, or rather each solution that you subscribe to. So if you have Creative Cloud Complete, you will have a card for Creative Cloud Complete. If you have Digital Publishing Suite or any of our Marketing Cloud tools, you will see cards for those as well. Under the Products tab, now this is something that we've kind of changed recently, and we've changed it to make it a little bit easier for people to segment out specific products to specific parts of their organization. So you'll see here that we have a product tab, and within that product tab, you'll see everything that you subscribe to or have access to. So for most people, that would just be Creative Cloud Complete. There may be Document Cloud in there as well, or coming up soon, maybe Adobe Stock if you want to add stock photos into your plans. So within each group or within each product, we can then configure different groups within there. So this is, as you see there, SC America's complete plan. And this is essentially giving access to a group of people within that product. So we're creating a group for maybe one region of the country. So if you are an education institution, maybe it's one department you want to create a group for so that we can keep that organized. And then we can also configure any of the services that we want. So any of the services that are enabled or part of your contract, if you have Creative Cloud Complete with core services, we can actually turn off any of the services that we don't want certain people to have. So we give you that granularity as to be able to turn off, say, Story Plus or e-sign services or whatever you may want to turn off for whoever you're working with. Now, when I click on the Users tab, this is what I'll see, and this is a giant list of all the users in our organization. Now, in order to add one, let's see, let me go back one. In order to add one, I actually click the plus sign up at the top, and then I can easily manually add users. Now, that's if I have a group of, say, probably less than a couple hundred users that I want to add into the enterprise dashboard. We also have an import option, so the ability to import a CSV file, and that can be up to 5,000 users at once. So that makes it a lot easier to be able to import users into the enterprise dashboard. Now, what I'll show you a little bit later is a much more advanced option, which is using what we call our User Management SDK. It's essentially an API that allows you to add, remove users, add groups, add users to groups, and that's all done programmatically. So you do have to do some programming, some coding, scripting, but it does allow you basically to send calls from your directory system, so something like Active Directory, and add users into the enterprise dashboard. And that makes it a lot easier. I actually have a couple of schools that are using this right now, and they are kind of loving that option because it does give them the flexibility to be able to send things to the enterprise dashboard from a separate system. So that's the User Management SDK. So I'm going to skip down past the identity tab because that's actually where we configure single sign-on, and it's a little bit more advanced, probably more advanced than we wanted to cover today. And we're going to click on the package or the deployment screen. Now this is where you can actually see packages that you created in Creative Cloud Packager, as long as the Adobe ID that you created the package with is also in an administrator group in the enterprise dashboard. So what Jim was showing earlier is and was recommending was a enterprise-wide or more of a institutional Adobe ID. So maybe Adobe software at university.edu or at school.edu. And then what we do is we add that user to the administrators group, and then the metadata is synced from Creative Cloud Packager into your enterprise dashboard based on that Adobe ID. And then we can see some important things about the package. So one of those things, we can obviously see all of the different packages that are available. And then you can also see which updates are available. So that was a weird kind of build there, but we'll go with it. So when I click on, say, video group on the package for video group, you can see that there's one update available. And then when I click the drop down to that, it actually tells me what the update is and what is part of that update. So for instance, this one is Adobe Premiere Pro 2014.0.1 bug fixes. So it provides important fixes and enhancements to the editing experience. So that's a really nice feature of the enterprise dashboard that I think very few people know about. Because as you recall, we had that blog before. We still have that blog, but ideally, this is a much easier place to get it. Now, we've also added in, just in the last couple of days, so we actually added in the ability for you to get email notifications on each one of these packages. So every package that you actually build and shows up in the enterprise dashboard, you can turn on email notifications. So when a new update is available for that package, you will get a notification saying, hey, there's updates available for this package. And that would encourage you, obviously, to go back into Creative Cloud Packager and build an update-only package like Jim showed. Now I can also see the package configurations for that package. So you can see here, this is all metadata that has been sent from Creative Cloud Packager during the build process. You can see it's a Mac package, it's 64-bit, obviously, it's a named license package. It shows which applications are in there, so you can see the Premiere logo there. And then it tells me whether the Creative Cloud desktop app is enabled and whether whether updates are enabled as well on that machine. So you can see here they are disabled. Now, support is also a key aspect of the enterprise dashboard because we are trying to make it easier for customers to get access to support and to input support tickets and also monitor those support tickets. Now, there's a support tab in here, as you can see, and this is actually the fastest route to support because this goes directly into their CRM system. As soon as you select the product family, you select the product, you select an issue, and then you describe your issue. Now, with enterprise support, what comes with an enterprise term license agreement, you can open a case and you should get a phone call back or an email back from somebody. Be contacted within 4 hours. That's our SLA. 30 minutes, you can actually check that checkbox at the bottom, critical production down. I need a response within 30 minutes. That's something that I would recommend using only in an emergency. We don't really want to abuse that, but you can see that you can actually get access within 30 minutes if something terrible has gone wrong, which we really hope does not. So this is a nice little aspect of the dashboard. Also, if you have expert services as part of your contract, you can also schedule an expert service session in here. And then also in the support tab, you'll see the phone number and email address for anybody if you want to get in touch with support that way. And we're going to be also adding a chat feature sometime in the future. So here's how you can schedule an expert service session. You can see you select the family that you want, kind of what the product is that you want some help with. And then you choose some times and when we can schedule an expert service session with you. So this is typically a 30-minute or a 1-hour session with one of our Adobe experts. It can range anywhere from deployment to something like maybe my Photoshop work group, we want to learn about the new features, or we want to go through this workflow, the specific workflow, help us figure out this workflow in InDesign. That's what expert services are for. Typically, those are included in enterprise term license agreements, but they can also be added on. So let's talk a little bit more about the advanced configurations. And the if we're looking for single sign-on, I've added in these links, and we'll also probably make this. I've exported this as a PDF, so we can make this available after the session in a pod. And you can actually, this is where you'll claim your domain. And the reason we have to claim a domain if you want to use single sign-on is basically, think about Adidas and Nike. You don't want Adidas claiming Nike.com or Nike claiming Adidas.com. We actually have to prove that you have to prove that you own that domain. And so it takes about 72 hours for our team to go back and look through some basic metadata to prove that you own that domain. And so you can also configure your single sign-on with this. It essentially allows your identity provider to talk to the enterprise dashboard, to talk to Adobe servers and say, yep, this person is part of the organization, and go ahead and pass them through. Now, if you want to programmatically add and remove users, that's where the user management SDK comes in. And there's also a link on this one as well. So just to talk quickly about troubleshooting, I think we had one question on here about the ports and the host names. I think we put a link in the chat pod as well for this, so that's there. And then if you have some problems, this is actually really important, because if you talk to anyone in support when there is an issue with deployment or installing anything, they're probably going to ask for the log files. And so if you're able to send us your log files, it makes it a lot easier for us to diagnose what's going wrong. Typically, there's about 5 or 6 different things that could go wrong. It's really not too many deep issues that happen with our software when trying to install. So it's important that you find these Creative Cloud Packager logs as we go through there. So there's those logs, as well as the Creative Cloud Packager logs, different types of logs. And then you can also view the list of the launch errors. So you'll see kind of an error as well in the log files if you go through that. And then we have a list of what those error codes are. And then we've got a bunch of resource links in here. So we'll make this available. I'll upload this at the end of the session. But with that, just want to kind of open it up for questions. And if you can put the questions in the chat pod, that would be great. The one question there, can plugins be installed via this deployment tools? No, they cannot. You have to do those after the fact. Typically, customers either push out those plugins through SCCM or have them baked onto the machine through an image. So they cannot be sent out through Creative Cloud Packager. Is there a list of apps and sniffers that should be running? I don't know of a list for that. That's probably something that we can find. If you want to reach out to me or Jim after the fact, we can probably find that. But I believe there's just the only app is essentially it probably would be called AAM Updater. And yeah, the read-write permissions, we can also get you that. Okay, so we have anonymous accounts, but students can log in with their own accounts if they have access to their services. How do we configure that? So that's sometimes problematic. So they obviously the serial number kind of lives underneath all those applications. So if you enable the Creative Cloud desktop app, then obviously the student can go and log in and get access to things like Typekit, um, as well as um, any other types of services, provided they have access to those services and pay for them themselves. Um, if you enable the Creative Cloud desktop app, then obviously a student can log in. The idea is the main point there is need to educate the students to make sure that they log out when they're done. So log out of the Creative Cloud desktop app makes the easiest process, because otherwise there can be conflicts between the serial number and the Adobe ID. And so we want to make sure that those kind of stay separate. Bob asks, can you talk about how Adobe handles account collisions between free Adobe ID and the federated Adobe ID? So um, there is a possibility that a user could have a Adobe ID and a federated ID. Now, when someone goes to adobe.com and tries to log in, they would and types in, so for instance, my email address, Dietz at Adobe, it would recognize that there is an Adobe ID as well as a enterprise ID or a federated ID, and that's because that domain has already been claimed. So it's similar to Office 365 in that it asks, which one do you want to sign in with? Do you want to sign in with your Adobe ID, or do you want to sign in with your federated ID? If you choose Adobe ID, it takes you to Adobe's sign-in screen. If you choose federated, it will redirect you to your university's single sign-on page. Now, as far as any kind of account collisions, I don't really know of any there. That's kind of the only challenge there. Now, if you're saving files, if you have collaboration and the services as part of your contract or as part of your deployment, obviously those are going to be two separate. It's essentially two separate user accounts, but with the same email address. So it's two separate email accounts, but it still has the same email address. And that's why we ask you, which one do you want to log in with? And no, there's no way to force a log out unless you've found a way to programmatically script that, but I don't know of anyone. Will they be logged out if they logged out from the computer, or are they still logged in from their ID then? They're still technically logged in even if they log out from the computer. So um, it's really best practice to log out of the Creative Cloud desktop app if possible. It's if someone goes to the next one and logs in, um, they those things are not necessarily saved per user; they're saved globally. And so that's why it's best use case to log out before completely logging off the computer.
It's a good practice for them to get into as well in case they're planning for whatever reason to use a public terminal somewhere and want access to things. It's just a good habit to learn more than anything else, and better to instill those habits early.
Okay, are there any other questions out there? Yes, there will be a recording. Matt is going to make this recording available afterwards. I'll let Jim answer Bob's question.
Not yet, Bob, but I'm working on it.
Okay, and then the last question there on Mac using mobile accounts or roaming accounts, which do you recommend? I don't know the answer to that. Roaming accounts and uh, serialization is not necessarily. It's kind of ugly. I don't really know how to answer that. We'll find a way to. I will reach out to you and find a way to get an answer to that. All right, I think that's it, Matt. I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. And thanks again and Jim. And thanks again to everybody for joining us today. The question was asked, but yes, we will be offering a recording. This session is being recorded, and we'll be sending out the link to watch that recording to all those who registered for this event. And just wanted to plug the other things we have going on the Education Exchange. You probably saw this webinar advertised through our live events, and so there's lots of other live events coming up throughout the course of the year. And we also have professional development opportunities, courses, workshops, as well as all of the other teaching materials, resources, and members to connect with on the Adobe Education Exchange. So if you're not taking advantage of all of those, please do. Thanks again to our presenters and to you all for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day and have a wonderful holiday. Take care.